Welcome to I Wrote That, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are navigating the crazy world of authorship. Whether you're just starting out or already established, we want to help you navigate the publishing world with confidence. My name is Larissa Soehn, and this channel is brought to you by Next Page Publishing. With the help of our industry partners, we bring you the insights on the most challenging, yet most rewarding parts of being an authorpreneur, along with the actionable tips to help you move your brand and your business forward. Don't forget to download your free copy of our book, Author Your Way to Your Next 100K, by visiting nextpagepublishing.net/authoryourway. Let's meet our next guest. Welcome back to another episode of I Wrote That. My name is Larissa Soehn. I am your host and the CEO and founder of Next Page Publishing, where we help entrepreneurs, thought leaders, coaches, movement makers, change makers, hone their genius into a book that is now a business asset that works for them so that they can get out of their business so that they can work on their business instead of inside of it. And today we are talking about the community aspect of authorship, which is really exciting because I think a lot of people think books are solo and books are meant to be built in isolation and books are meant for, one reader at a time. But what we have today is Laura Zug, and she's going to bust all those myths up for us and talk about how community actually serves an author in the long run. So I have Laura here today. She is a community strategist who helps authors and thought leaders design people-powered ecosystems. Oh, I love people-powered ecosystems. Those are the best. That multiply their influence without burning out. Through her signature Reach and Revenue Matrix framework and Community Foundations program, she guides leaders in creating sustainable community models that transform readers into engaging advocates. Her clients describe her approach as the oxygen that breathes life into their communities. I love that. Laura is the founder of the Hive and the intimate strategic circle for the community builders who prioritize connection and impact. Welcome, Laura.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm a huge reader. So coming on a podcast to talk to authors and future authors, it just couldn't be a better fit.
And you and I have been in each other's circles for quite a while now. I mean, one of my past clients, Dennis, is now working with you or has worked with you in the past. And, his goal from the very beginning, his book is called Dennis on the Run. It's a survival guide for men. His goal from the very beginning was to provide a safe place for men to come and talk about their feelings while maintaining that manly air that I think society expects of them, but they can come in and safely start to layer things back. And he's the one who actually connected us. And, he's a unicorn client. He's one of those people that you're just happy to have because he believes in his mission so wholeheartedly. So I don't even know where this question is going because there's so much to it. What is it that is so important about communities for authors? Let's start there.
Okay, we're just going to start with like a big question,
just a really big one, though. Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's so important at the outset to define what we're talking about when we say community, because it's one of those words that's a little bit squishy and hard to wrap your mind around. And I want to make sure that anyone listening today is kind of clear about what we are meaning as we talk about community. So community is often confused with audience. And if you picture audience kind of like you as the sage on the stage, or a bicycle wheel with the author, the writer, the thought leader at the hub, and then speaking out to people like a broadcast message to people that they're trying to connect with. That is different from a community where the goal of the community, just like the example you were sharing about Dennis and his wanting to connect men who read his book and bring them into this safe space, what he's really doing there is creating connections among the readers and among the people in the community. So it's less about only Dennis's voice and more about the people who are kind of bought into his ideas, connecting with one another, and really taking his ideas and making them their own, and they in turn have a voice. So if you think about an image, if we have like the bicycle wheel for audience, for community, the image could be a web where it's more decentralized and you're elevating some of these other voices and they're connected and talking to one another.
Like communities for authors. It's like a giant book club, right? But I also like it for readers because, you just said when you came on the show that you're an avid reader. I'm an avid reader too. Obviously the people on my team are avid readers. And yet we still don't have that space to just collectively come together and just talk about the books that we've read and the cool things. And that's where integration doesn't happen, right? Like you read this most amazing book and you want to talk about it. So then you have no one in your circle and you're looking around, you're like, oh, who can I tell this really cool thing that I read about? And there's no one waiting for you, which means you forget about it and you don't integrate it. And communities, when they're leveraged off of, an entrepreneur who has a book and, the book is almost the entry point into it.
Right.
Everyone has this foundation. They're all coming in at the same medium level to the community, to the language, to the topic is. And I think that's so powerful for authors.
Yes. And for the readers, right? And then it takes your readers from being this passive person who may be engaged with the ideas, from pages 1 to page 103 before they moved on to the next book, to someone who has a relationship, not just with you, but with other people in the same orbit. They begin to live out what they read on the page, and almost become like mini evangelists for the work that you're doing. I think a community can definitely amplify an author's story and message. And I think it's amazing when I get to connect with an author beyond just this beautiful book and realize, oh, wow, there's a human behind this who sat at her breakfast room table or dictated this as she was walking through her neighborhood. And she wants to talk to me, like the person who read the book. That is very humbling as a reader. And it makes me so endeared to those authors to the point where I would just snatch up any book they wrote because I feel this deeper connection to the author as a person.
Yeah. Any extra books, their offers that they've got coming out, you might go see them speak, like all of these things. It starts to create incredible brand loyalty. And you can have brand loyalty and person loyalty too, right? Like, so for example, I'll expand on that a little bit. Next Page has really been going through this evolution of moving away from me at the center of the brand as the CEO and the founder. Like we know as a solopreneur, that you are the brand, like everything you have. But now we're moving away and, our books are helping us scale our systems you said people-powered ecosystems. We have book-powered ecosystems. They are all working to the spot where I'm no longer the center of it. And your books and your community, they can all help build up whatever element you want amplified. So that if scaling is on your mind, you can start bringing, and Laura, I'd love actually your take on this inside communities and things like that. How would a brand that is more brand centered and not person centered kind of facilitate the insides of a community like that?
Well, I mean, I think sometimes community can act, can play in multiple fields. So your community can serve in essence as a customer support arm. You're talking about specifically for brands, not necessarily like founders or authors. Right?
Correct.
Brand centered. Okay. So your community can help with customer service, right? Like it's a place to go and get user experience and user information for how others are maybe using the product. It's a place that can feed back information to product development. So if you think about your community members almost as your super users, you can go to them like a focus group when you're trying to develop your roadmap or decide what's important for future customers. You can leverage future purchases by your loyal fans who might be in your community. So in that regard, it helps a bit with your marketing. So it sort of touches on many angles and aspects of a brand or business's operations. It's not solely member A chatting in the corner with member B. Like there are business advantages of having a community that apply to brands as well as authors, individuals, solopreneurs. So yeah.
I feel like communities are very, very similar to books in a lot of ways where, general population is looking at them like, oh, a book is good for lead magnets. A book is good for giving out at the end of your speaking events. Like, it has like three basic uses, and it all hinges around sales. You got to sell the book to get any profit from it. And then people look at communities, they're like, well, yeah, it's a place for you to come in and connect with a lot of people. Like it has like very linear things, but the reality behind communities in books is that you can use them however you want. They can amplify any goal that you have as long as you go in strategically thinking, okay, this is what I want my community to impact, or this is how I want my book to serve me in my business. And we have a rule, or I personally have a rule, and then I make my team follow it, is we don't do anything new unless we can use it three ways. It has to have that helps us guarantee, 3 times the ROI. It helps us streamline our processes. We're not creating what I would call like red herring plots inside of our business, right? Things that don't connect, things that are just more time consuming than they are valuable. And I feel communities, like based on what you just said, that's the same process, right? You could come in with, 3 to 5 goals of what you want this community to do for you and for your audience, right? When you're the people, once they are no longer audience and now they're inside your community, you've clarified for that, and that was beautiful. So my question, Laura, is before we take a quick break, because I'm going to set you up for when we come back from the commercial break, but authors, people that for the listeners that are right now, they're in the writing phase. They're thinking about it, and as an author myself, I know that the writing phase is all consuming in a lot of ways. All you're thinking about is the pages that are going to go on, or the words that are going to go on the pages, right? But as an entrepreneur, we have this due diligence to think bigger pretty much at all times. It's think big, act small in a lot of times. So how can authors, as they're writing, set healthy goals that don't deter from the writing process, but help them move towards, the community that they want at the end of the day?
Oh, okay. I love this question, which leads me a little bit to like a big mistake. Sometimes I see authors kind of like flip-flopping from, I'm going to be over here in the corner working on the thing. I'm going to perfect the thing, and then I'm going to tell everyone about it. Then I'm going to go build community. And what I would say is like, that's too late. We want to start building our community throughout the process. In some ways, it kind of ties into the building in public trend, or at least becoming a little bit relatable. So I, for example, love an author. Her name is Kayla Craig. I have her books, and I also subscribe to her paid Substack, which is in a way like a mini community. And paid subscribers have access to the author chat. So because I am part of that author chat, I know she's working on her next book. Occasionally, when she gets stuck, she might post a question in her chat and say, hey guys, what do you think about A or B? And I don't know if she's going to really, at the end of the day, care what those of us who respond think or say. But every time there's something that she's asking, I feel more connected to her as a human and a person. I am sitting here on a podcast telling you that she's going to have a new book coming out. I feel a little bit more invested in that book. So I think getting off the pedestal and actually speaking and involving the people who are going to read your book is really something you can do along the way without allowing it to be overwhelming. And I have another client, Mitch, and he was gathering data and stories for his next book. And he put out a Google form and he put it on his social media, and he wanted to collect some stories. And he talks to a lot of educators, but he wanted to broaden the types of stories he's telling in the book. And he just had a Google form for people to share anecdotes and experiences that could then make their way into the book. So I don't think it needs to be a major time suck, but there are ways to open the doors to your readers or future readers as you're going through the process.
Absolutely. And I love that. And that's where we're going to come back after the commercial, because I want to dig a little bit more into working in the spaces that you're comfortable in, right? Like the author that you're talking about is in Substack. And I actually personally have never, I wanted to look into Substack, but I think the part of being comfortable in the writing process and in the engaging with your community is knowing where your audience is and knowing where you're comfortable and where you can naturally communicate and connect. So we're going to come back after the commercial and we're going to talk about methods for engaging your audience early on that don't burn you out. This season on I Wrote That, we're not just talking about books, we're giving them to you. My brand new book, Author Your Way, is finally here. And you can download it right now, completely free at booksunlimited.app. That's booksunlimited.app. Inside, you'll learn how to write a business-boosting book that builds your authority, attracts aligned clients, and grows your income without getting lost in the publishing chaos. And here's the bonus. I've included a powerful resource kit to help you plan and start your book. Just follow the instructions inside the book to unlock it. And while you're there, check out a growing library of free reads, business books, memoirs, fiction, self-help, and more. No paywalls, no subscriptions, just powerful stories and big ideas, freely shared by bold authors. Visit booksunlimited.app and download your next chapter, starting with Author Your Way. Okay, and we are back with Laura Zug, who is our community master guru, facilitator, teacher, all of the things that help us move as entrepreneurs from thinking of our audience, which is us, as you described it, on the stage, getting them to know us, getting them interested, introducing ourselves into a community, which is our members on a closer relationship. That's when we actually start formulating and creating the back and forth. It is a relationship. Your audience is often one direction, right? You're speaking to them. They are not speaking back in a lot of ways, but in the community side of it, they've come in, they've read your book, they know how you think, how you speak, how you teach, all of these beautiful things. They know what you're about, your ethics, your values, your morals, and then they come into your community, and that's where you really get to start to build loyalty around the relationship. Right? So let's talk about platforms of community and communication and things like that. I am not a tech person by any means, and I'm going to maybe go on a limb and guess that maybe most of my audience isn't either. So Laura, in your experience, what are the platforms where communities are being built and thriving right now?
Okay, so I'm going to dial this back just a little bit. And first, I'll say one important piece of the community is not only a channel from your reader back to you, but opening the door for readers to connect with other readers, member to member conversation. So not only opening a two-way dialogue between you and the people in the community, but rather finding ways to facilitate their forming a connection or beginning to see themselves in one another. So
beautiful distinction. Thank you for that.
It's okay. And then I do talk about community all day, every day. But then the other piece is we started, we do want to talk about platform and we want to talk kind of about the nitty gritty of how. But before we even open that door, I want to say that your community isn't the platform, right? The platform is a tool. Your community are the people. So, as long as we can keep in mind that at its core, we're talking about people and where are the people going to gather, well, then it's extremely diverse, right? It could be something in person. Maybe you have the bandwidth for a once-a-year retreat and that lights you up. That could be a way to have community. Maybe you go on a podcast tour, a book tour, and then you have some Zoom discussion Q&A with the author, and you're just simply using your email list and a Zoom room, and that can be the nucleus of your community. I do think that there's so many writers on Substack, and the way Substack has rolled out new features and tools, so you can go live, you can post your podcast there. There are notes now that kind of make it work like social media, so you can be discovered. Like that's a really great platform if someone's thinking, gosh, I want to dabble in community, but I don't quite know how. That's a good place to start. And then you can go all the way up to like community centered, community specific, all in one platforms like Circle, Mighty Networks, Heartbeat. Unless you're all in on community, design an experiment first. See what feels doable, and don't necessarily feel as if you have to like commit your life to this ongoing experiment. So
Yeah.
does that help?
No, that's perfect. And I think that's a really good lead into the people that are, I mean, you can be on either sides, I guess. You could be all in or you could be just curious. I'm guessing you have ways to support both of those people, the people that are like, yeah, I'm all in. This isn't, I started this business knowing this is where I was going. And then you have the people that are probably more like me that are like, should I, shouldn't I? Where do I play? How do I play? How do you support both sides of the spectrum for that?
Well, honestly, I would probably steer both towards the same direction of let's run an experiment and something time bound before we commit to something that's going to go on and on ad infinitum. Like we need to make sure there's a demand for it. We need to make sure that we also enjoy it and that it's not swamping us. So I recommend very often that someone starts with a time bound experience. For an author, I mean, a very natural place to begin would be a book club where maybe you meet 2 times, maybe you meet 4 times, maybe you meet 6 times, and that gets you going with something that's relatively easy to run and facilitate. Then pieces of it you might be able to make asynchronous, you might be able to rinse and repeat it without too much effort. But design a community experiment before you decide to go like storming off on this road and concoct this elaborate community experience, because community, it takes time for them to develop and gain and grow and gain legs. So I like to recommend like walking before we run.
Yeah, I think that's fair too, because audiences are different, right? Like it's interesting. We just introduced a group program and it kicks off the second cohort kicks off in September. And in the application for it, to meet with the coaches and come in and decide if it's the right group for you, we actually have a question of like, do you prefer group or one-on-one? Like, and it's surprising how many people, like how split they are. And then sometimes you can say they could answer both, but like rarely do people answer both. They know. And so you might have an audience that you've accidentally predisposed to one-on-one or more intimate group coaching or things like that versus the community. And I think your idea of the experiment is really good because you can kind of see, where is your current audience at? Or do you need to do some list building work with new content that's more community centered? I think that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah. And you can also, once you have your content in your plan, there are a lot of different levers. I talk about it a little bit like a soundboard where you can dial things up and down. Not everything needs to be on max, but some of the levers you can adjust are timing and pace, cost, access to you as a human, intensity. So, for example, I recently read Susie Welch's new book, Becoming You, after listening to her podcast. And, I've probably got a lot of the content between her podcast and reading the book, going to her website. But I also signed up to go to her 3-day intensive in New York City in September. I'm kind of like not sure what else I'm going to learn. Of course, it's going to be a ton, but the experience of being in a room with other people who are so invested in the topic that they also have chosen to invest in themselves, invest in this 3-day experience. That to me is fascinating. Like, who else is going to be in that room that Susie has brought together? And then Susie's charging a much higher price for this 3-day intensive than, I mean, she'd have to sell a lot of books to make that revenue. So taking the content and packaging it in a different way for different people at different times is a way to extend kind of the legs and the life of what you've invested all your time in.
Absolutely. Yeah. It allows diversity in your offers, right? And your services and things like that. Absolutely.
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. We have to wrap up, but I feel like I have a bunch more burning questions. So my favorite question, Laura, what advice do you have for aspiring authors?
Trust your voice. Your voice is so needed. And I just came back from KIT, which is an email service provider, from their conference. And one of the topics that we were really diving into is like, what does content creation look like in a post AI world? And the word I came home with, which is so ironic from a conference about digital marketing, was analog. And how can we stand out? It's by being even more human and more authentic and a little bit more vulnerable. I and when you are that way, the people who are drawn to you will hear almost like a beacon, like you'll call them in. And don't be so worried about the people that you might repel, because a strong voice, I think it's Gretchen Rubin who said, a strong voice will attract and repel. And that's okay. So I would say trust yourself, lean into your humanity and all its messiness. And the people who are meant to be in your world and your readers and your community members will feel even more resonance with your message.
Absolutely. Know your voice, know your audience, and they will come, because and then you will reject the ones that don't. That is a big lesson in the scaling side of business, is learning who we do not want to work with just as much as who we do.
Right. Yeah. You have to have your gut check question. Everyone's going to have their own, but get your gut check question.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the vibe? Mine's just the vibe, honestly. Like, I can tell sitting across from someone, or virtually, of course, if this is the right fit or not. And I can tell within like 5 minutes, right? Energetically. And like, you're right. The more analytical people, they'll have a set of like a checklist of like, do they meet these things, or did they, is there something triggering? Know your yeses and know your nos. That's beautiful. Okay, Laura, how can people get in touch with you? Because I am guessing that some people are listening to this, are like, okay, I do want to explore a community more. I need some parameters on how to experiment. How can they connect with you?
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, you can go to my website, which is just laurazug.com, Zug like hug. I'm writing weekly on Substack, more often on LinkedIn. And then I do have something that might be helpful for people. I created a community snapshot. It guides you through some of the things that I help brand new clients work through in terms of like price, reach, scale. And it helps you get everything distilled onto one page. So I think I can make sure you have the link, but it's go.laurazug.com/your community snapshot. And you can download that, and hopefully it'll help get the ideas out of your brain into a one-page hypothesis.
That is so helpful. That 1-page summary, especially for like, we deal with the founders, the visionaries, the thought leaders. They can all get jumbled up in there sometimes in the top of your head. And you're like, I don't know wait, am I going left, right? Am I going up, down? So that sounds incredibly helpful.
And I will say that once you get it out of your head, treat it like an experiment, like a hypothesis. This is not a blueprint. It's your snapshot of where you're starting, and then you're going to experiment and validate from there. But it gets you to a point of being able to get your ideas into flow.
That is excellent, Laura. We're going to make sure we have all of those down in the show notes so people can click through and get those, and definitely connect with Laura and check out this. That 1-pager sounds fascinating. I can't wait to look it up personally. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom with us. Communities are going to continue to be a much needed connector as we go forward into these future years, and the world gets it's not going to get simpler. I can tell you that. It's just going to get more complicated. And so the more we can lean into each other and on each other, like you said, it's not just the author to the members, it's the members to each other. And we're going to need so much more of that. And if you can use your book to guide people in so that you all have that starting point, that's just even better.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you for having me. I could talk to you all day.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks for tuning in to I Wrote That. Don't forget to download your free copy of Author Your Way to kickstart your journey as an authorpreneur. You'll find the link in today's show notes. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps more listeners like you discover the show. Until next time, happy writing.